Okay, then, Don, thank you. Thank you for joining this particular session. I would like to maybe, start from your background. Like, what do you do for your living? At the same time, like, what kind of struggles you had in terms of getting to where you are now?
Absolutely. So my name is Dawn Taylor, and I'm the ass kicker hope giver of the Taylor Way. And I'm a trauma specialist. And I also do a lot of business consulting. And so, oh gosh, how did I get here? It's been a really crazy long journey riddled with trauma. And like a lot of entrepreneurs, we were talking prior to this that 72%, a study came out, 72% of entrepreneurs have some sort of severe mental health struggles going on. And a lot of that is tied to the fact that we had trauma as kids, right? Or in our younger years, and our control was taken away. So we grab on to control anything and everything we can in our lives. And so you'll see people that have like the perfect body or the perfect house or the perfect car, or they become entrepreneurs because they can't handle a boss. They don't like to be told what to do. And they go out into this realm. The problem is that we still have our trauma, right? We're still full of all the trauma. So now we're reacting in a trauma response. We're hiring through that. We're, marketing through that. We're doing all these things through this little kid inside of us that's hurt. And that's honestly what I believe causes the failure of so many businesses. And so I work probably 60 to 70% with men and women, kids down to the ages of, I'll go as low as 8 or 9, but I usually don't go lower than 12, and clients into their 80s. But the majority of my clients are business owners. They're entrepreneurs that are needing to level up, or they're needing to really dig down deep and actually deal with a lot of the trauma in their past so that they can fully move forward. So for me, that was so much of my journey, right? Was having dealt with such a horrific childhood. It took a lot to get here.
How did you even begin the journey in that case? Because you're dealing with your trauma while you're trying to build this, uh, you know, business, yourself. I'm sure there are some steps that you took in order to get to where you are. So maybe you enlighten me on that route.
For sure. So for me, one of my struggles was my brain didn't work with typical psychology. So I needed more intense, deeper, faster. I was like, I need this to be different. This isn't working for my brain. And I needed more action, more logic, I needed a plan of attack. And so at the point where I started digging in and really doing some work on myself and getting some support and help, was I really looked at like, what is the root of everything, right? The presenting emotion might be anger. The presenting emotion might be rejection. That might be where I'm reacting through. But like, what happened at the core of this that's causing this in the first place? And that's really where I started to dig into like neurologically, how do you rewire your brain? How do men's brains think different than women's brains? How do we process things? What is the cycle of grieving, and how does that actually pass down neurological pathways? And I started to do a lot of research into this and go, okay, so there's reasons why, right? So for an example, when we grieve something, it goes into the trauma portion of our brain when it happens. And then through grieving, it passes down, literally down neurological pathways into the memory portion of your brain, which is why something that happened, say, a year ago is just a memory, where something that could have happened 20 years ago feels like it's still a trauma that just happened last week. Well, it's because things are stuck there. They're stuck in that portion, right? So then how do you get them to move? How do you get those pieces to move? And that's really where I started to dig in. And I found for myself, I did better, especially with business. I found that with typical therapy, which works for a lot of people. I'm not saying it doesn't work for most people, but there's a lot that it doesn't work for. With typical therapy, I'd go in, I'd sit there. It would take 20 to 30 minutes to get vulnerable and start getting into the deep stuff. I'd have maybe 10 or 15 minutes to work through something. And then I would leave feeling more tender and more frustrated and lower than when I'd walked in. So for me, I realized that I needed like 90-minute to 2-hour sessions. That's what I needed to really dig in and figure it out. But the biggest was an action plan. I needed to know that there was an action plan so that I wasn't going to be in therapy for the next 25 years, so that I wasn't having to do, Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. for the rest of my life. And so that's really what I've developed as well in my plans for my clients, is how to dig in at the rate that their brain needs so they can actually get that healing. And that's where I started. I started with doing a lot of research and then started creating almost patterns and programs and processes to put my own brain and emotions through to heal.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. One thing that sticks out is, like you mentioned, there's a difference between how male and female brains are wired, if I understood you correctly.
Yeah.
And what did you find in that particular research?
One of the most impactful things that I talk about often with clients as well is a male brain is two different lobes. It's logic and emotion,
Mm-hmm.
right? They're not attached. So when a guy is in his super logical side of his brain, there's no emotion. And when he's in his super emotional side, there's no logic, which is why guys can get in a fight and scream and yell, right? Throw punches and then go for a beer 5 minutes later, is because they've heightened this emotional side. And now they're back to logic of like, no, we're actually friends and we're good and we're fine. Where a woman's brain actually has a membrane that attaches the two lobes. So they're logical in their emotion and they're emotional in their logic, right? So we spend a lot of time so irritated at the other sex going, you don't get me. And women going, why aren't you more emotional? Why aren't you feeling this? Where guys can actually just shut that off.
Mm-hmm.
They can totally step out of that emotion and just do the steps. They can just like dive in, which is one of the reasons why it's so hard sometimes to go into the emotional side when they're dealing with their own personal stuff, right? And why they need plans and action plans and almost like a checklist to mental health, right? Because it's not easy to just jump back and forth.
And did you find similarities or difference, in terms of approach when you are dealing with a client who is a male versus female, on how they handle the trauma?
Oh, absolutely. Women are often more, I have found with trauma clients especially, is women hold their vulnerability level way higher. So what I mean by that is it's way more right below the surface. So you'll see a lot of like snipping or a lot of like biting comments or remarks, or they're faster to cry, they're faster to yell, because their emotions sit really, really close to the surface often, where guys bury it really deep and they'll even go as far as to dissociate,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where they'll just bury it. But in doing that, they'll shut off all emotion. And they'll just like put up barriers, they'll put up walls. This is where I'm at. And so it's interesting with a woman, they're way slower to trust, typically, because they've been hurt. They get hurt so much easier because they're up here, like they're leveled so high with their vulnerability. And so when they do share it, they can often get hurt with it. Where a guy, it'll take way longer to like break down those walls and barriers. But as soon as they trust, they get the most incredible results, because once I'm in, right? Or once they actually get into it, they're like, yeah, okay, let's dig this out. Let's rip this apart. Let's deal with this.
Yeah.
And it's always really entertaining, where I described it to my husband one day. I said, my guys are the ones that I call my male clients my boys.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, my boys are the ones that want like a 2-hour session or a 4-hour session, or I'm going to fly to your healing home. So I have a trauma healing center,
Mm-hmm.
like a suite in my home. And they'll be like, I'm flying to you and we're going to dig into this and heal it all in a week. Where a woman is like, I want to pick away at this for like an hour at a time over a longer period of time. Like that kind of like, it's such a difference, where guys are like, no, let's just do this. I'm in. let's do this.
Hmm. Hmm. And what do people really talk through? Like, do you see a pattern, as far as um, different traumas are concerned, right? Maybe it's not a it may not be general, I understand that, but
Yeah.
still there might be some patterns, like, okay, in this particular kind of issues, like, maybe you would have developed a certain I don't know, a program for individuals. Are there
Mhm.
such patterns that are there, or it is not, let's say, generic of the nature?
There are definitely some major patterns. There's always some underlying issues with almost every single client. Two that I see a lot of, so much of, especially with entrepreneurs, is the inability to bond. And that comes from prior to your birth. We learn how to bond in utero.
Hmm.
So, based on what's going on with our parents from when we're conceived to birth, that can completely shift how we bond growing up. And if we know how to bond, if we have that ability to bond, and I see that a lot, more than I care to admit. I see that so often in clients. And it's something that I also deal with myself. And so that's a really big one, is this inability to bond. And so people often feel like they're the odd duck in their own little pond, or they're unique, or they're a lone wolf, or, these are terms that I hear all the time and how people describe themselves. They've never really fit in. They've never really connected to people in the same way everybody else does. They always feel like they're on the outside watching, right? Which can be a double-edged sword,
Hmm.
because it can be something that's beautiful because you can disconnect yourself from outcomes in a different way. You can disconnect yourself from, maybe your staff or things that are going on in your life and just focus on the work. It makes for phenomenal entrepreneurs. But at the same time, you don't ever feel totally connected to your people, right? And to your staff and your teams and your families and different things like that. So that's a really big one I'm seeing more and more these days, that's coming out. And the other is being raised in rejection.
Hmm.
And so this massive feeling of being not enough, being unworthy, feeling rejection right from childhood, from birth, of, maybe you thought that you were stupid, or you were too dumb, or you were too fat, or you were too whatever, you didn't get the right grade, you didn't have enough friends, whatever it was. But that feeling of rejection and the fear around that holds people back like you wouldn't believe, because we will reject so that we're not rejected, right? So we will push people away so that we don't get pushed away, right? And that's right down to the person in your business that won't make a phone call because they're terrified of getting told no on the other end, right? And that's a big one. Those are two themes that I'm seeing a lot of lately.
Yeah, because why I just asked this particular question perhaps is because I hear entrepreneurs, and I ask this question as well to entrepreneurs, is like, don't you think it's a lonely journey? Because it's a journey
Yeah.
that you are taking, and you are seeing those. You would have set a goal for yourself, and you want to achieve the goal, and regardless of all the challenges that you have in your life,
Yeah.
you are making all the sacrifices, and just to you want to achieve the goal, but in doing so, there's so much going on in your personal health, right? So that's
Oh,
perhaps the
totally.
one. Yeah, and that's why I wanted to know the pattern, if there are a pattern, like why people do it in a certain way, so
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, and often it is, right? If we're so scared of failure, or we're so scared of rejection, or we're so scared of these things. I posted a question on my personal Facebook the other day about, why are we so scared to take time off,
Mhm.
right? Why do we feel so much guilt and shame around taking a day off, or taking an afternoon off, or practicing self-care, saying, you know what, I'm tired, I'm going to have a nap today,
Mhm.
right? And what are the fears around that? And so much of that is people feeling like a fraud, people feeling like, heaven forbid, if I take a day off, my whole business is going to shut down, right? Or I'll lose all my clients, or we're such extremists. We're such extremists in a storytelling way in our own brains, right? I was talking to a client about this a few weeks ago, and I said, okay, so if you take off one weekend a month, you work 7 days a week right now. You take off one weekend a month. What's the worst thing that could happen? And he was like, what do you mean? I said, what's the worst case scenario? The absolute worst. He's like, I lose my business. And I was like, from 2 days a month, taking 2 days a month off. And he goes, well, yeah. What if, like, I'll lose everything? And I said, so how many people do you have in your database right now? How many clients do you have in your database? And he's like, well, about 7,500. And I said, so you're somehow going to manage to make 7,500 people so angry at you that not one of them comes back to talk to you ever again or do business with you.
Yeah.
Ever again.
Yeah.
I was like, you're going to have to plan that out. Like, you're going to have to do something drastic. You're probably going to have to go to jail. Like, that's really hard to do. Right? But this is where our brains go. These are the stories we create in our heads about, if I take an afternoon off, what if I miss a client? If I take an afternoon off, what if that's the afternoon that I could have hit that, I would have figured out that puzzle I've been trying to solve, or I could have fill in the blank. Instead of realizing, like, no, I need to recharge my batteries, because right now I'm running on half empty, which means I'm not running very well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? And so when we can really dig into that and be like, okay, what specifically is so scary about that? Best thing I ever did for my business, I take a nap every day.
Mm-hmm.
5 days a week, I take a nap in the middle of my day. And people laugh about it. And they're like, Dawn, how? And I said, because I've been the wake up at 5 a.m. and work from 5 a.m. till 8:30 or 9 p.m. 6 days a week for years. And I realized that if you actually track your capacity, track what's going on in those last like 5 hours of your workday, and how effective you really are. And I realized that, like, my capacity was pretty bad in those last 5 hours of the day. And if I just take that break middle of my day, it is substantially better for the rest of my day.
Mm-hmm.
My business doubled when I started taking naps every day.
Mm.
And taking time to actually care about myself, and, go for a walk in the garden in my yard, or go sit on the beach, or go play around a golf, or, do those things.
Mm-hmm.
Because all of a sudden the fulfillment piece is there. I'm actually feeling like I'm being rewarded for my hard work, instead of just plugging away at it one more hour, one more day.
A lot of entrepreneurs, like I said before, or in the earlier session, that we have so much hours in our hand now, like we don't need to travel, right? So we think that's given
dangerous
to us. Yeah, that's very, very dangerous, because if you imagine, like, personally, I used to travel, pretty much every day, like at least 1.5 hours, 2 hours, and then sometimes even longer, sometimes 3 hours a day.
Mm-hmm.
And that used to be my time. Like, I didn't used to do anything. I was just in the train and just maybe looking to people, listening to music or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And that used to be my time. Now I don't have that time, right? And it's not my story now. It's a story of millions of people, like, who are working from home.
Millions.
You mentioned about there's a pattern in terms of how men handle versus female handle the trauma. One thing that you mentioned is people take time to open up. As far as men take time to open up, especially. And how do you see that comparison as far as people changing their behavior is concerned? Like, are women more reluctant as far as changing the behavior? Or do you think that is different? It's in terms of men. Like, maybe men are more easy to change after they trust you, or it's the other way around.
It totally depends on who the person is.
Yeah.
I have clients that they just hate being told what to do. And that comes down to a control issue from their childhood, usually, right? Or a time in their life where somebody hurt them. And I find that whatever my level of vulnerability is with a client often matches what theirs is. So if I am willing to share my pain or my struggles or my past, right, there's an instant bond and instant connection, and that will help somebody to trust me more and to buy in or believe me more and then make the changes. But it really comes down to who the person is. So if I have some clients that I say anything, they're like, yeah, I'm on it, let's do this. And they just make the change like that fast because they don't need, they're not jaded yet.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They haven't been as hurt by the world. They haven't, and not that they haven't had the trauma, but they haven't maybe gone to as many coaches or therapists or taken as many medications or, talked to as many people. So they're not like, oh, great, someone else who's telling me I can actually get healing. Right? So they're just like, yeah, let's do this.
Mm-hmm.
And it's typically like, I need to get them one really good result, whether it's in business or personal, one thing that does like a big shift. They're like, oh, okay, now I'm bought in. Now we can do this. That definitely helps. But it's often the people surrounding you.
Mm-hmm.
Because we, as a society, we go to the negative. We just naturally, we're wired to go to the negative. And so with that, though, we often don't like seeing people around us thrive,
Mm-hmm.
which is incredibly sad, right? We don't look at somebody else. Like, I get made fun of for having naps every day. I get made, like, people are like, what the hell? What? I actually had someone ask me, like, who do you think you are to deserve, like, to take that much time off for yourself? And I was like, you're in control, like, you're in charge of your schedule. Take a nap. And they were like, what? But we don't want to see that, right? Because the things we hate in other people are really the things that we hate about ourselves. It's like we're looking in a mirror. So when we see somebody else thriving in some way, right, we'll hate on them for it because deep down we're like, why don't I think that I'm worthy of having the same? Right? So if we're surrounded by people that are dragging us down, if we're surrounded by people that are pulling us down into their hell, it's way harder to do the work. So that's a big part of it. A huge part of it is the people you're surrounding yourself with. And so I find that even with my clients, if they're on their own, like if they're a single person on their own, or they're surrounded by people that are like, we're so proud of you, you've got this, like we're really excited that you're doing this work and we're here to support you. How can we love on you? It's so much easier for them. Where if they have people that are super jaded and they're like, it's not going to work, why are you trying to do this? That definitely slows down. And backtracking for a second on that, we don't have that travel time in between things now, and we don't have that extra time. I think another piece of that too is with so many people working from home,
Mm-hmm.
there's this weird, we're never out of work. We're never away from our jobs anymore because our job is sitting at our kitchen table.
Yeah.
Right? So we're not getting that difference. And so one of the things that I've worked out of my home now for about 17 years. And so I'm very used to this prior to COVID. And one of the things that I've become very, very good at is, and a recommendation I have to your listeners is, get up in the morning and set an alarm like you normally would going to work. Do your morning routine without thinking work, right? Get up, have your coffee, pretend you're going to the office.
Mm-hmm.
Pretend you're going to the office. Don't change that because your computer's not sitting on your kitchen table.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And then when it's time, and I've had clients that I've even recommended, like, put on your coat and your shoes, walk outside, even to your front sidewalk, turn around and come back in. Just psychologically, like you went to the office now. As silly as it sounds, there's something psychological about, no, now I'm at work. Right? Don't just jump up in the middle of your day to go do laundry. Don't take phone calls in the middle of the day that you wouldn't have taken if you were normally in an office. Put those boundaries on your workday the same as they were. Yeah. Right? So if you have always eaten at your desk, fine, eat at your desk still. But if you're used to leaving the office, get up and leave your office. Leave where your computer is and go to a different area to take your lunch break. And then at the end of the day, change your clothes. So when you're done at the end of the day, change your clothes into something totally different that triggers your brain psychologically, that you're in a different space now, that you're in a different life now, that there's something different going on. It's a huge brain thing, right? But there's science and research coming out now that 42% of our day is supposed to be in a rest mode. That is what our bodies require to function at like a decent level. 42% of our day. So if we're not sleeping, where is that rest time coming in?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Our bodies need that. Take the time to sit and read a book. Take the time to sit and veg on TV. If you listen to audiobooks for an hour and a half on that train every single day, sit outside and enjoy the wind on your face and listen to an audiobook for an hour and a half a day. Right? 45 minutes before you start work and 45 minutes at the end of the day. Some of those habits that we had created were so good to us, and we need to just incorporate those into working at home.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Interesting. One thing that stood out again is you mentioned that you want to surround yourself with people that creates that environment, or maybe the positivity. But how do you recognize, like, if somebody is not recognizing that maybe the cycle, or the circle of friends, or the people are sort of, creating that energy that they perhaps don't want to, they don't want it, right? So how do they
Yeah.
realize or recognize that it's not working for them?
Well, we become the average of the 5 people we spend the most time with,
Mm-hmm.
right? And we've all heard this saying, but we don't ever really think about it. You don't become the best of the 5 people you spend the most time with. You become their average. So if you look at the areas of your life, right? Mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, financial, relationships, marriage, all of these things, look at those areas of your life and go, okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being I absolutely hate it and it's the worst ever, 10 being it couldn't be more perfect, where am I at in all of these areas? Right? Now look at all your friends. Where are they at? Do the math, average that out, because you're going to become them. Right? So if you, as an individual or as a couple, you're hanging out with couples that fight and bicker all the time, you will start to fight and bicker all the time. Just like if you're hanging out with someone who's super growth driven and they're always listening to another podcast and always reading another book and always excited about the next thing that they're learning, right? We start to be like, oh, wow, I'm missing out on something. I want to do more of that. I want to learn more. I want to read more. Right? And that's just taking a really hard look at the people that are around you. Would you step into any of their shoes? Would you want that area of their life? Right? And when you can really look at that, and I'm not saying cut out all your people, but I'm saying look at how much time and energy these people are getting of you. Right? If you're wanting to say change your eating habits or change how your health, or you're wanting to change your lifestyle, or you want to watch less TV or whatever it is, it doesn't matter. It can be simple, it can be big, it could be business, it could be growth, it can be all these different areas. But your friends are only ever ordering pizza and wings and eating potato chips and drinking beer and watching TV every night. Right? You can look at them and go, wow, that's who I'm going to become. Mm-hmm. Am I okay with that? And if not, okay, where do I go to find people that are maybe mentally healthier? Or not even mentally healthier, but maybe it's just that have different values, that are going in a different direction. Because being an entrepreneur and being a business owner is one of the loneliest things on the planet, right? Because you're in charge, you're the boss, you're the decision maker, you're the leader. You can't, there always has to be a boundary between you and everybody beneath you, because they need you to be strong. They need you to be that person. So maybe that's where you start like a mastermind group of other business owners and entrepreneurs, where you guys can get together and talk and have honest conversations about like, hey, how are you doing? What's going on? What are we doing for growth? Maybe that comes down to like a book club or a podcast club, or right? It's just finding other people in your life that are also on the same path you're on, that can help motivate you, that can help drive you, that can help, inspire you to do different.
Yes. And now in your practice, when you are taking clients, let's say when you're onboarding clients, what's the process that you have? Like, how do you even start?
So it's super easy. People can contact me, right? Like you can email me, hello@thetailorway.ca, or go to my website, thetailorway.ca. And it starts with a phone call to figure out what's actually going on in your life. What are your pain points? Right? And so often what I do, even in a first session, and the first session is usually, okay, let's just like dig in and start talking. I'll ask a ton of questions where it's like, okay, what's working, what's not working? And now what kind of plan are we going to create around healing this? So I'll have clients that come to me and go, I want to double my business in the next 6 months. I have no idea where to start. I have no idea where to start. And in building my business to this point, I've created some really bad habits. Like I've allowed clients to pay only half of what they should have. And I've created weird packages for people and, almost like this desperation to get things rolling. And now I'm getting busier and now I don't know how to level up to the next level. Right? So we'll go through that and be like, okay, do you know who your ideal client avatar is? No idea. Okay, we're going to start with that. What are your fears around this? When I ask this question, when I say this statement, when I say these words, what pops up into your brain? Okay, these are some of your massive internal fears that you have on your business, right? Okay, what areas of your life are you struggling right now? How's your marriage? How are your finances? How are your kids? How's your house, right? And I go at it from a personal and a business standpoint, depending on the client. Some are like, nope, no, not touching my personal. We're just doing business. That's fine, right? But that's really how I look at it is, okay, let's like dig in and kind of figure out what's going on. I can often tell based on what comes out of, I can always tell, let's be honest, based on what comes out of that session, kind of like where some of the childhood trauma would have come from, what's going on. And then we can create a full action plan on like, okay, this is where we're going to go. This is kind of how we're going to go through this. These are the steps we're going to take, right? So we're going to do like this little piece of business here. And then we're going to, once this is built, we're going to build on this personal. And then we're going to do this little piece of business or, and build on that personal. Or it's like, oh, okay, we need to dig right in and do some trauma work really fast because you're self-sabotaging and falling apart. Right? So then we figure out what works best for them. So I have clients that I talk to for an hour and a half every week. I have clients that book, a 5-day stay in the trauma suite in the healing home with me. And they'll fly in and, we'll just dig in and do the work. And I have some clients that need me for, an hour a week plus 15 minutes a day where I'm dealing with this issue right now. How do I deal with this? Right? I know I'm overreacting in this situation right now and I don't know why. Or this, I'm ready to kill my employee and I don't know what's going on. Right? And so, I have clients that do that just, they need me on a consistent basis like that to be this like sounding board and this voice of reason in their head on a regular basis while we work through things. But it really all comes out of that initial session. Where it's like, let's just dig in. And I do some fairly intensive intake paperwork for people so that I have a really good idea of where they're at prior to them even needing to say anything.
What did you find as far as entrepreneurs, trying to open up with you, and some people are stubborn, like we discussed before, because it might be associated with the trauma, during the childhood, or whatever the trauma it is. But what if people don't realize that there was a trauma for them? They actually faced the trauma. Maybe people do not realize, like, they had those issues, but then they're agitated all the time. They're annoyed all the time, but they want to fix that, but they don't know how to.
100%. I see it all the time. So I think one of the big things is people don't understand what trauma is.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people think that trauma is just the big bad things, right? So it's like your PTSD of, you were involved in an accident, or you were attacked, or there was a sexual trauma, or there was something really huge, right? A trauma is any emotion, event, environment, or like a moment that hard hit you, something that hurt. It could be a conversation. It could be a conversation that you had as a kid with somebody, and it like damaged something. It's like it broke something inside of you, and people don't realize it.
Mm-hmm.
And so epigenetics is also the science behind the fact that we hold our ancestors' trauma in our DNA for up to 3 generations.
Wow.
That's science. We hold our trauma in our physical bodies. Like, it's ridiculous. And so when we go through trauma, our brain goes into this fight or flight response mode, right? So what happens is, say a bear is chasing you. That's a traumatic event. A bear is chasing you, right?
I don't want that. But let's take that example.
Right? So what happens is it triggers your HPA axis, which is your hypothalamus, pituitary, and adrenals, which fires off your cortisol, right? So it fires off your cortisol levels. It shoots a sugar through your body. You can outrun the bear stops chasing you, and everything comes back down and you can breathe again. But what they've now actually proven scientifically is that unrepressed emotions from things that have happened in our lives trigger your HPA axis the same as a bear chasing you. Our bodies can't tell the difference. The problem is, until we actually deal with what's going on, until we deal with the emotions, our body is still in this heightened fight or flight response mode, which is why we have people with such severe adrenal fatigue and high cortisol levels, and they're exhausted all the time, and they have no control over so many things in their lives emotionally, right? Is because of that. So I'm actually trained to do subconscious imprinting practitioner. I'm a subconscious imprinting practitioner, as well as all my other training, to find where in your body that trauma is being stored and then how to release it. So often it's like common things though, right? So it's, if someone is biting or they're snipping or they're whatever, you can dig in and figure out, like, okay, when is this triggered? What time of day is this triggered? What kind of people are triggering it? Those sorts of things. And it's easier than you'd think to really be able to like dig in and figure out where it started, so that you can heal where it started and then it's gone. It's amazing how cool. It's amazing how, I shouldn't say fun, how fun it is though to like really dig in and connect those dots for somebody, right? Of like, oh my gosh, that's why I respond that way. That's why I react that way. It's because of this situation that, maybe happened when I was 7 years old with my dad, that I had no idea were so triggering to me. And now, because of what that did, I'm now reacting over here in a completely, different way than I should. Right? And now I can actually figure out how to deal with that. Those aha moments, that's what gets me out of bed in the morning. That's what gets me excited.
Yeah. You explained the term, but I just lost you a little bit, maybe it just froze a little bit.
Yeah. So I have multiple certifications. I've done training in everything from rage and cathartic work to, I have like marketing and business diplomas. Like, I have all kinds of crazy stuff that I've done in my day.
Yeah.
Right. And different certifications and stuff, and all kinds of random courses and things that I've taken. But I'm also a strategic interventionist, And I'm a subconscious imprinting technique practitioner
Yeah, that's what I was
as
looking
well.
for. So,
Yeah.
subconscious, what was that?
Subconscious imprinting.
Imprinting. Okay,
Yeah.
subconscious imprinting. Okay, and
Yeah.
how or what do you do there? Like, this is the first time I'm hearing that term. So, as
It's
far
a
as the
very
practice,
new concept. It's a
yeah.
very new concept, and it's a new program that's been developed that actually doctors and psychologists are starting to use in their practices to help their clients.
Mm.
And right now, I'm one of about 100 practitioners in the world that can do it, which
Wow.
is really cool. But yeah, it's digging in, right? It's digging in and figuring out where in our bodies we're holding our pain and our trauma and our fears. It's interesting. My husband, for example, he just started a new job. And for the last few weeks, the top of his foot, he's had this like weird spot. And he all of a sudden he comes down to my office and he's like, okay, fix me. And I was like, okay, what's wrong? And he goes, this weird like spot on the top of my foot is just throbbing and I cannot figure out what's going on. And so I did a session on him and I was like, oh, there we go. And he's like, holy cow, that's exactly what's been going on and how I'm feeling. Right? He's like, yes, those are all my fears around this whole new venture in my life. And the minute we dug into that, the pain was gone. Right? All of a sudden that pain is gone. So it also works really well with like physical pain. I
Oh.
was talking to a friend the other day and she's had this crazy shoulder pain up into her neck and down across top of her shoulders. And I was like, right or left side? And she's like, why? And I said, which side? And she told me, and I was like, oh, girl, you got rage issues with your mom.
Is
She's like,
there? Yeah.
yeah. And I said, yeah, that's what that is that's where you actually hold your rage. And I said, and that's like, like that's tied to like love, that's tied to all these other parts in your brain. And I was like, that's actually where you hold it, is in that side of your shoulder.
Hmm.
And so we did a quick exercise to release it, and all of a sudden her shoulder pain went away.
Hmm.
It's really crazy. It's so cool how it works.
So does that mean like you have a set of catalog or set of I don't know, rules or whatever you can call it, that maybe depending on the type of the pain or where the pain is, you can perhaps say, okay, maybe this pain is coming from, I don't know, having, like you
Yeah.
said, having raised with your mom, or maybe you have an emotional connection with your, I don't know, spouse or your children or whatever that is. Um, is there a difference? Like you could say that this is because of this, like you could tell that?
I can tell that because I'm trained to figure that
Yeah.
out. Yes.
But
And
that's
I can
interesting.
often, like even in talking to a client, I can be like, oh, okay, based on how it's presenting, based on the emotions around it, based on, how people are talking about it, I can
Mhm.
often tell like the age of where it started
Mm.
as well. And a lot of that is from experience, right? Because even things like when divorce happens prior to the age of 12, it's like someone was taken from you, is how our brains process loss. Over the age of 12, someone left you. Well, you can see how that is two totally different emotions,
Mhm.
right? It's still loss, but the way you're processing it is completely different. So now, as an adult, right, if somebody is talking about like a client leaving, or a client, or a situation with a friend, or a situation with a loved one or a spouse or a girlfriend or boyfriend, whatever it is, just based on the wording of how they talk about it, I'm like, I can often be like, oh, okay, so some sort of trauma happened prior to the age of 12 because of how they process loss in their life now in, say, their 40s. Right? So there's like all kinds of little things like that that I can, on the side, that I can also use to start to figure out kind of where people are at and what's going on.
But it is interesting what you just said, because often, people, when you are dealing with your physical pain, you often maybe associate with, I don't know, some kind of issues within yourself physically only. You're
Yeah,
not thinking about your mental well-being at that point in time. You're just thinking, oh, maybe
100%.
yeah, maybe I have a pain on my left side, and that
Yeah,
would be it. And maybe I slept wrong, or my position was wrong. That's
yeah,
the reason I'm feeling uncomfortable or something.
yeah,
We start to blame those things all of a sudden, right? So
always.
yeah,
And so often it's not.
yeah,
So often it's not. I've had clients that were supposed to go in for surgery on like their hips and their knees from all this pain, and we linked it to something that happened in their childhood, and now all their pain is gone.
ah,
I think it's just, and it's something that's really actually, it's interesting even right now as a society, is we're starting to be more accepting of alternative healthcare,
mhm,
right? In acknowledging that not everything is cookie cutter and not everything works the same for everybody. And I have a lot of tools in my toolbox. So
mhm,
for me, it's my favorite is being able to individually work with a client and go, okay, this is who you are. This is where you're at. How can I love you even more right now? How are we going to get you where you need to go? And whether that's in your business or that's in your personal life or that's dealing with some sort of trauma, because it affects us. It affects all of us,
mhm,
right? We can only build your business as high as you are. You can only lead your team as high as you are. So if you're struggling with your mental health, if you're struggling with whatever has happened in your past, you are holding your business and your team at that level.
mhm.
And I don't think people realize that.
Yeah.
Yet they wonder why they're not doing better, why they're not making more money, why they're attracting such horrible employees, why their business isn't growing, right?
Mhm, mhm,
And it's because it is being held at your level, where you're at.
mhm.
So heal yourself, heal your business.
Yeah, yeah. Interesting what you describe, because I never personally I never thought about pain, being associated with any kind of trauma or any kind of issues that I have, internally.
Yeah.
I always associate that, I'm sure like a lot of folks who are going to listen to this podcast are also going to say, think about the same thing, because
Yeah.
as soon as like you have pain, you start to associate that with some kind of physical issues, right? So
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. It's very interesting.
Yeah, I never thought like it was kind of eye opener for me,
Yeah.
definitely.
It's awesome. It's a different world out there. And yeah, as you can tell, I'm very passionate about what I do, but
Yeah,
also getting people healing,
yeah,
right? Physical, mental, emotional. Yeah.
yeah. And maybe can you explain a little bit in terms of the success? I would like to learn two things. One of them, obviously,
Mhm.
you are passionate and you love what you're doing, and that's incredible. Otherwise you wouldn't be doing.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm sure there are times like you felt like, oh shit, why it's not working. Can you maybe can you maybe talk
Yeah.
about those moments where you felt like, okay, this is not working, this is not going to work
Yeah.
out, or there are situations you felt like, okay, you're putting too much effort and this is not going anywhere.
Yeah.
Maybe help me understand those aspects as well.
Absolutely. I think it's been a big one, even just in the last 14 months with COVID and everything that's going on, right? Is our egos get involved.
Mhm.
People's egos get involved and we attach our worth to our business,
Mhm.
right? Our identity becomes what we do and what we own and all these things instead of being an outside thing, right? And so it's been really interesting to watch people, even during this last 14 months, in terms of how they, and I hate the word because it's so overused right now, but like the pivot, right?
Mhm.
How to be more fluid, how to adjust, how to shift what we're doing in business. And so for an example, if someone has always networked in the exact same way, they've gone to the same networking groups, they're used to those weekly coffees, they've always done it in a certain way. And now all of a sudden business is going in a totally different direction. One of the things that I know for myself is, last year I went from face to face, sitting in my office with clients, with networking, with all these things going in one direction, to all of a sudden we're on lockdown and I'm not allowed to have anyone in my office.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so for me, it always goes down to, okay, if I look at this with no judgment and just curiosity, this isn't that I am failing. This isn't that I am screwing everything up. But if I actually step back and just look at it from an outside perspective and go, okay, no judgment, let's just take a look at this for a second. What's working? What's not working? How can I make it better? Okay, what's working? We have Zoom, we have internet, we have, right? Which now is the entire world is shifting to this worldwide perspective of like, hey, wait, I don't have to just work with somebody in my own town.
Mm-hmm.
The whole world's on Zoom now, right? Or on Google Meetup or on Facebook or whatever it is. Like, there's this big expansion that people aren't realizing in that way.
Mm-hmm.
Holy cow, I could go to a networking group in Europe. I could go to a networking group in Australia. Like, I don't have to just be at the one I can drive to in an hour.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So what's working? What's not working? I can't have people in my office. People might not have the same finances as they did before. Whatever it is, right? But when I always go through that list, because as soon as I go into like oh, woe is me, why is this not working? Why is this so hard? Why? That's just an emotional response. Right? And that just throws me into a victim mentality. And then I end up curled on my couch watching Netflix all day. Right? So when you can look at that and be like, okay, so now how can I fix these things? All right, so not everybody is in the same financial position. You know what if I started doing Facebook Lives every single day at noon, 5 days a week for the first, I think it was 9 months of COVID. I did a Facebook Live where I invited anyone to come in, ask questions, and I just did like coach for free for half an hour to an hour every day. Right? I was like, why not? Like, it doesn't hurt. I can start group coaching things where people can pay a lower price point and come in and do that, right? It's when we can remove our ego from the situation and be like, you know what? Just because that isn't working, there's so many other things that I can do to make this work, right? But we got to get our ego out of the way because that's really what it is, right? So in that, right, I have my days. Everyone has their days where they're like, holy cow, I wish that I just had a Monday to Friday, 8 to 5, and I got a paycheck every other Friday like all my friends did, and a pension plan and all those things. Right?
Yeah.
But then in those moments, that's where I sit down and I write, okay. And those 3 questions, seriously, what's working? What do I love about being an entrepreneur? What do I love about being my own boss? What do I love about owning my own business? Okay, what am I hating about it? What's not working? Right? What that does is that gives you a list of your pain points. So now you can look at those items and go, okay, now what do I need to do to fix those? And change those. Right? Is it that you just actually don't have enough time? Okay, do you need to hire a VA? Like, do you need to hire an assistant? Do you need to do some hiring? Do you need to do some firing? Right?
Yeah.
We're often really scared of this rejection thing again, so we won't fire the bad people in our offices or the poor performers, right? Or the toxic people because we're terrified. What if they don't like me? What if I hurt someone's feelings? Instead of being like, no, they're actually killing me and my business. They gotta go. Right? But then that gives you an action plan. So instead of just sitting at home and crying into your pillow with your bottle of wine, it's like, okay, here's my plan of what I'm going to do now to make those changes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's where I always have to go back to that. I always have to go back to that. Right? So even within my own office, I often will look at it. I was talking to my husband this morning. So my husband is not an entrepreneur. He's an employee, and we've been together 25 years.
Wow.
And yeah, really long time. So he deals with having a crazy wife who's an entrepreneur and has owned multiple businesses and always had something going on. And we talked about it this morning, and he's like, so what's not working right now? And I was like, I don't even have enough time to mow my lawn. Like, it's ridiculous. And he started laughing and he goes, so what are you going to do to fix it? Because he knows the language that I use, right? And I said, oh, don't worry. I have a landscaping company coming today for a meeting to talk about mowing my lawn every week. And he just starts laughing and he goes, I love that that's your fix. And I said, well, I would rather be helping somebody than outside mowing my grass. Right? I don't need to have such a big ego to think that I can actually handle anything and everything in my entire world. I'm allowed to ask for help when I need it. Right? And so, yeah, that's what I always go back to that.
Yeah, I found entrepreneurs like, being stuck in a sense that, at the start of the journey, you're always thinking about like, what if I can do these things? This things looks very small and I can do it myself. And even though it means like, it has a lower quality, but then I can do it myself, I don't need to pay extra for other people, which on its own, like, if you are cutting costs, then perhaps it's a good thing. But at the end of the day, it's not adding much value to the end clients, then maybe it's not that good, right? Maybe you should be focusing on something more valuable than that, so those are conversations I have with entrepreneurs sometimes.
Yeah. Well, and it's, what is your zone of brilliance?
Yeah.
I know what I'm really good at. I also know what I'm really bad at.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And when we can acknowledge that and be like, that's not my thing. Mm-hmm. I'm going to stay over here in my own lane and find someone who's really good at that, who can take care of that for me. Mm-hmm. Right? And it's often those big leaps, right? They're the scary ones of like hiring that first staff member, mm-hmm. hiring that first team member, right? Because you're like, oh, what if I fail, right? But that comes down to this whole leadership thing of set them up for success. Have your manuals, have your processes, have your procedures, have your policies, have all the stuff in advance. Have it figured out that those things in your business you're handing over, mm-hmm. a 10-year-old could do them. And then let them shine. Mm-hmm. Let them shine. I don't do graphic design work because I don't have a creative bone in my body when it comes to sitting and doing graphics.
Yeah.
That's not who I am. That's okay. That doesn't make me not enough.
Yeah.
Right? And so that's where starting to build that team of people around you. Mm-hmm. Especially with other entrepreneurs, and especially people that are doing startups and they're really like early stages of business. Guys, go back to like bartering days, right? Because there's 100,000 other entrepreneurs just like you. You might find a bookkeeping company that's needing to trade services for what you're doing. Yeah. I had a house cleaner for 4 years between clients because they kept trading me services. I had a massage every week for years. Even now, I have parts of my business that I do trades with people. Mm-hmm. We barter. If you don't have enough money to pay for someone, what do you have to offer? How can you support them in a way in their business? Now you don't actually need the money to do it.
Yeah.
Right? It's just a different way of looking at it.
Yeah. I wish there was a barter system here. I'm a bit jealous that you get the massage every week. So
I did for years. It was amazing.
I really miss. Okay, interesting. It was very interesting talking to you, Don. I get to talk to a person in a different context altogether today. Um, Usually, like I said, I get leadership and talking more in a technical playing field, but then today I experience a different perspective, and thank you for being a part of this wonderful session. And I'm looking forward to seeing you again in the future, with new insights. And maybe by then you would have more data to play with and explain me how certain things work.
Yes.
And it was interesting, Don.
Thank you. I was so honored to be here. And I want to challenge all your entrepreneurs, your listeners, all your people. Life is too damn short to suffer.
Yeah.
Whether it's me or it's someone else, fix what's
Ab-
going on between your ears and watch your business flourish.